Okay, so the first video talking about engagement strategies, um, or more specifically, like the three different areas of engagement, she talks about emotional engagement, behavioral engagement, and cognitive engagement, and kind of what these different things look like. So, emotional engagement is where the student enjoys being in class. He or she wants to be there. It's a positive experience for him or her. Um, and they, I think this is something that we're preached to often, or get to know your students. And I think that's where this kind of comes in, building that rapport with them so that they are emotionally engaged. And I think in ag classes, they choose to come out to our classes. And so maybe that's a piece that's a little bit to our advantage. And then behavioral engagement, I kind of found this one interesting, and like it was kind of calling me out a little bit. But behavioral engagement is the fact where students are engaged in meeting your expectations. So they're coming to class, they're not tardy, but they're like turning in assignments, they're working towards maybe are motivated by grades and they're engaged in that way. Um, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to get good grades. They're just meeting your expectations. But just because they're doing that doesn't mean they're necessarily learning. And I can think of so many examples where I go to class, I participate, um, I check the boxes, and I move on, and I forget it all because I'm not actually cognitively engaged. Um, so I thought that was pretty important because from the outside, maybe it looks like they are, but in reality, they're not cognitively engaged. They're just meeting expectations. And then the actual cognitive engagement is where they are learning. They're connecting these things to their personal lives, to their outside world, and it's sticking with them. Um, and it's can be difficult. I think this is one that can be difficult to obtain, and the fact that some students are going to be more cognitively engaged naturally due to interest or previous experience in a specific unit in your class, or even like one class you're teaching. If they're in that class and the next year they come to another class, maybe they were cognitively engaged in the first one, but not so much in the second one. So I think that one can be tough, but the video also talked about some of the overlap that happens. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, I think the video didn't specifically talk about this, but I think we have to start with emotional engagement. Because if the student doesn't enjoy being in class, doesn't want to be there, then why are they going to take the extra step to try to learn the content or meet expectations? So maybe it didn't quite mention that, but that was just kind of my own take on it, I guess. And then that first video also talked about the Pygmalion effect, that high expectations are going to equal better performance, which is something I've heard before, and I firmly believe in that we should have high expectations for our students. And I've always known that I've done better when I know my teachers expect more from me. Um, but it's kind of interesting to see the science behind that and the fact that a lot of that stems from teachers subconsciously um, providing maybe extra support or helping students through failure if they have higher expectations for them, and giving them more praise and recognition. Whereas if they have lower expectations for those students, they maybe subconsciously they're not actively thinking about this, but they're like, well, yeah, that's what I expected from them. They don't feel responsible to help them advance. So for my teaching, I think just making for sure that regardless, just starting with a clean slate as students come in and seeing them and seeing their potential. One thing that I want to do in my ag classes to maybe help integrate this is I think SAE is incredibly valuable. And so setting up meetings during the first couple weeks of school with students, and helping them set goals for their projects. Um, and the freshman year, that's going to be their exploratory um, SAEs. But these things, just setting those goals, I think can help us see where these students want to go and like set those expectations for them and then transfer that same thinking to my classroom. The next video in that engagement strategies module was talking about kind of increasing student effort and helping students see the reward that they get from putting forth effort. And I think this is something we face as high school teachers, especially, that can be incredibly challenging. From clinicals this semester and my previous semester, I saw a few kids who just didn't care, couldn't care less, and they'd rather just be on their phone. They are not engaged really in any of the areas. They didn't enjoy being there. They weren't meeting expectations. They weren't learning, just completely disengaged. And so the thing that the video talks about is that there are students who come with different, well, and every student comes with a different perception of what them being engaged and them putting forth effort will result in. Some students are going to anticipate that that's going to give them better results, so they're going to be more likely to put forth effort, where some students haven't seen that. So we actually have to teach that to students and show them that their effort and their contribution will be rewarded or recognized. And so for me, I think one of the ways I talked about in the video, I guess first I'll address that, was including influential people or like motivational bell ringers, which I think can be good. But like, I think about their peers being the most motivational. And I think with FFA being an intracurricular activity, I think that is a tool that we can use as ag teachers, because there are students who are going to chase after those things and put forth effort and be rewarded through the FFA program. Maybe a little heavier on the FFA and SAE side, but if we're tying those things into our courses then and really integrating the 3-circle model, I think that we can use FFA and show, well, look, this kid or your peer earned their green hand in their chapter degree because they did this and this, and they can see this physical reward. But even more, I think we as teachers can provide, I guess, I don't want to say less significant, but maybe not as concrete recognition and reinforcement. So if we have a student who is growing and doing well and improving, we can help them see that growth and help them recognize that the end product of their grade is not the most important. Now, I think that can be difficult. For me, I'm someone who's incredibly motivated by grades and always has been. And I know that there are other high school students who are like that. There are some students who don't care about their grades. But regardless, I think we can help them set goals, work with them, and get to know them individually to figure out what they want to work towards. And even if that goal includes like reaching a certain grade, help them break down what that looks like and how to get there, and then help them recognize when they have done that and they've achieved those goals. The praise that we use should also be specific. The video kind of talked about that. I know, like when I was collegiately livestock judging, we had our coach, or excuse me, I can't remember any time like when someone would say like great job or excellent, good job. Like those things have left my mind. But there were times when my coach or my teammates would tell me like, oh, that was a really great opening statement. I loved how you pieced this and this together. Or like I can think back after giving a set of reasons after a contest and coming back, and our coach just spending the time to actually break those down with us and to go through. It motivated me a lot more than if she would have just said, great job. So I think making our feedback super specific and helping students realize that they are growing and recognizing that and showing them that we care about the work that they're doing. And I guess a little tangent on that is just making sure we're not providing just busy work, making sure it's a purposeful work that is going to help students and that we want to see them grow in. I think it's then easier for us to provide meaningful feedback because they're doing meaningful work. And then just briefly, I'll touch on, they talked about the reward system. It might seem kind of elementary, but I've seen from my clinicals, again, like even something concrete. I talked about earlier, like FFA has this kind of built into it, and if we integrate our program correctly, we can build on that and incorporate that into our classes. But then also things like, well, kids or students being able to leave the classroom like 2 to 3 minutes early. They get to go to lunch a couple minutes early, or these things, or they get to sit. If you have an assigned seating or whatever that might be, they get to sit somewhere else. I have saw how much the high school students love that. So I think integrating some of those concrete rewards can still be beneficial, and help them see that their effort is going to give them reward, and then we can help them transition that extrinsic motivation to more intrinsic motivation. Um, and then the design and project-based learning module talked a lot about, the first video talked about the problem and project-based learning and making the student work matter, making it relevant to the student and making it relevant to the real world. They talked about how school is so often um, just participating in like memorization or all these things where it just doesn't really matter to the real world, and it doesn't matter to the student. But when we involve them in project and problem-based learning, or design-based learning in the second video, they're practicing critical thinking and collaboration and communication, while still learning those things. And I know from my personal experience, I just know that it sticks more with me if I know that it matters. Just briefly, I think about like my feeds and feeding class in junior college. That's not in high school, but um, he connected it to, he found out like our experiences and what we were involved in and what experience we had in the livestock industry, or if we had all these different things, and connected it to the content. And I can still balance out rations algebraically and all these things that, like that knowledge has stuck with me because we were given chances to participate in these project and problem-based learning activities that were authentic. Like we were identifying animals and assessing their needs. So we were looking at the problems, quote unquote, and then providing the answer ourselves and working through that process. That kind of transitions directly into the design-based learning. Um, Again, she talked about it having to be authentic, but not only authentic to the real world, but having connection to the student. And then allowing that student to identify the problem and making sure it's kind of a hands-off approach. The teacher isn't involved as much. He or she is not necessarily setting the expectations exactly. Now, it's important to have those guidelines and whatnot, but the students are kind of developing their own criteria as they advance in figuring out the problem. They're identifying the problem, and if they do that, it's going to be relevant to both them and the real world. Um, and they start by brainstorming and finding this problem, and then they're able to come up with or design like a prototype, or in maybe more of an ag-based solution, like kind of answer a problem, or come up with a solution, and then they can test that or evaluate it. And then if that doesn't work, or there are improvements that can be made, then they can move back into the planning, the prototype, and so on and so forth, and make it an iterative process. When I think about integrating this into my future classes and into ag classes in general, um, maybe this example is a little far-fetched, but I want to have livestock and animals on available for my students, somewhere on a land lab or whatever we might have access to. And so if one of them gets sick, which is bound to happen, I think involving students in that process and allowing them to, maybe this isn't quite design-based learning, but problem-based learning, allowing them to assess the symptoms and figure out, okay, the litter of pigs that was just born, we have 3 of them that are exhibiting these symptoms. The next day, another one is sick, and seeing, well, then that means it's a contagious, these types of things, and like breaking down their symptoms, trying to figure out and assess what that problem is, and then coming up with treatments or solutions. And maybe that even involves contacting a vet, but like working through that process. And then, maybe it's a more pressing matter and this wouldn't work as well, but allowing them to test those solutions and then move forward into planning again if it doesn't work, and then figuring out another treatment. So I think about this with, maybe more mild problems, like a few of the pigs in the litter have got a cough or whatever it might be. But allowing the students to really identify that problem and then figure out a solution to it, they're gonna remember the principles of animal health care so much better than if we just tell them about it, because they're involved and they're taking that authentic experience, and it matters to them because more than likely they don't want to see the pigs die. And so, or maybe they're involved and that's part of their SAE and they get to use these animals, then they want to be able to show them, or whatever it might be, put them back into the breeding program. They still have stake in it, and they want to find the solution. So it matters to both them, and it's a real world problem that's authentic, and can kind of follow that same design process.